So welcome to this video on the DPW design WF-1 Wavefolder. So this is a wavefolder where it splits the folding into the positive and negative sections of the waveform, labelled P for positive and N for negative. We've got clean audio that can pass through and a modulation level. The output of the modulated folded version is inverted, so we can get quite creative blending clean dry inputs with folded inverted tones. Have an output level, a limiter and a distortion switch, and a switch that selects whether this is symmetrical folding or asymmetrical folding. Symmetrical would mean the positive and negative portions are folded the same. Asymmetrical would mean they're different. And as the settings are split and the modulation split with a P input for CV and an N input for CV, we can do some quite creative things. Have our main output, which is the blue trace on the scope. The green trace on the top of the scope is our input. Have two more outputs, which are pulse waves, which are generated from the positive and negative folded tones. So we can do a big, wide, kind of fake stereo, big pulse width modulation thing. So let's listen to it. Turning this up, let's turn the clean signal up. We can see that's not inverted. We can limit this or distort it. And there's a range of distortion tones in there. Here's the modulation wave. Notice that's inverted, as we said. We can drive that a bit up top as well. Now I'm going to put this into symmetrical mode. And let's try some folding. We can play around with this offset for the positive folding and the offset for the negative folding, and these are like the thresholds for where the folding will actually happen on the waveform. You can see that little fold point on the wave changes. Let's make this asymmetrical. There's those famous Batman ears that you can get with some folders. So let's blend some clean signal in. Try limit it. Distort it. And these pulse outputs, this will be for positive. We'll pulse width modulate around that offset for the folding, and so will the negative one. P and N are CV attenuators for the incoming CV. And the expander, the E1, gives us a CV switchable limiter and distortion input. So these are variable. This literally controls this switch. We can turn on and off the limiting with CV, which is great at audio rates for ring mod-like overtones and AM style modulation, and the same for the distortion. But these are also great taking gate sequences, Euclidean rhythms or accent patterns to create little extra accented notes in your sequences and patterns. So let's get into a range of patches and see how this thing responds. Okay, so here's a pretty bonkers patch that I will break down and build up, but let's just have a little play around first. I am taking the folders output into this humpback filter, and it's great having this two-way tonal modulation where you fold a basic wave to create moving harmonics, presuming that you're modulating the folder, i.e. this one, and then we filter those back out, and it gives us lots of points for modulation. The filter is modulated by a stepped sequence and an envelope. Back the resonance off. I'm using the E1 expander, and these are basically on and off switches for the limiting and the distortion that we do get on a switch anyway. But doing that at audio rates means you get this like ring mod style AM tone. Do that with a limiter as well. We could do it with both, with different audio rate tones, or use an accent pattern or a gate sequencer to trigger these on and off for tonal changes in time with beats and other sequences. But I like this overtone that we're getting. We'll leave that out for now. I have two modulation points of the N and the P, the negative and the positive. Try and kind of clean that up a little bit. We can make this symmetrical. Make Batman ears waveforms. Change this offset, which is the threshold of the folding. Let's add some of that modulation back into P. Well, this is symmetrical, this is like the master fold control. And this is our CV attenuator. Taking this out of symmetrical control, we can fold that negative portion and again change its offset. Let's add some modulation of that. These are just two quite slow looping envelopes. Getting some nice like PWM style pulsing. We can blend some clean signal back in, and you'll see that on this blue trace on the scope. Limit or distort. So just slight tonal changes there. Symmetrical again. And not. Let's add the audio rate turning on and off of the distortion. Pretty full on. But when we filter that back, that tone that this audio rate modulation of switching the distortion on serves as just a nice little accent when the filter's that bit more open. So that's just processing a sine wave. Let's move on to some more complex tones and modulate those to see where we can push this wave folding. So here we have a more complex tone at the input. And this is a wavetable. It's the Erica Synth's graphic VCO, and we're fading between two waveforms with an LFO. We're currently just listening to the clean output, so you can see our input signal and our output, the one we're actually recording, are pretty much the same. Dry input on top, output of the folder on the blue trace on the bottom of data, the scope. So it's a more complex and already quite gnarly tone. Let's turn up the folded version and just play around. With the switch for symmetrical folding, let's push this positive level. Change the offset of the folding. Oh, that's nice, like a really broken pulse wave. Let's try the distortion switch with that. Not a huge difference for this tone, but let's go asymmetrical. Just limit it as well. So it's a wide range of really metallic and driven noisy tones over that already quite gnarly wavetable inputs. Let's try some modulation of positive and negative portions of this waveform. I'm just going to attenuate that CV top. Another LFO to the negative input. Really full on. And what's great with this kind of tone is actually plugging it into something to then calm it down. In this case, I'm using the Rabid Elephant Natural Gate, which is a low pass gate. Really aggressive tone, but it's really calmed down quite nicely with an external low pass gate. So here we have CV at the input of the folder. The input is this looping envelope, again the green trace at the top of the oscilloscope. This currently going through to the folder, back to the scope, and the blue trace is the output of the folder. Currently got the clean dry input up full. No folded tone. Now with this set quite neutral, the offsets for positive and negative and the levels, the folding for each of these at 12 o'clock. Let's turn up the mod amount. And we can see it's inverted. The output of this is modulating a filter, so when the clean signal came through, we could hear this open the low pass filter's cutoff. But because the cutoff's quite low and this is inverted, I first have to turn it up. Let's play around trying to fold this envelope. Just a basic rise and fall. As you can see, we can add some kinks into that wave and get a more interesting complex modulation. That little percussive kink in that wave's quite nice. Just playing around with the filter it's modulating. So let's modulate the positive and negative outputs and start to see how kind of complex and moving we can make this really basic input. It's a really fun way and a very modular approach to take something very basic, modulate it, fold it, manipulate CV like we would audio, and get some creative and interesting results. Now these two outputs will act just as pulses. This would be useful for deriving timing information from these complex shapes. You could come up with some quite creative, some quite erratic rhythms. So here we're going to wavefold a kick drum, and we're using the SSF Entity bass drum synthesizer. You're currently listening to my drum mix with the clean bass drum. But I'm also splitting that out into the folder. And I'm modulating the folder, and we can see on all these LEDs what these CV values are modulating this folder. And it's just a bit of a dirty, choked out sound. It's not that useful on its own. I certainly wouldn't want that as my only kick. However, EQ that a little bit and get it through some delay. And then blend it with the dry kick and the rest of the drums. With an interesting little tonal change and sort of modulating accent on that bass drum. Little background sound. So we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg with the potential for this thing. There's some great suggestions in the manual for the module and other content from DPW as well to give you even more patch ideas, including that stereo PWM style patch that I mentioned earlier in the video. Thanks for watching this video on the DPW Designs WF-1 Wavefolder and its expander. Be sure to check out other future music Modular Monthly videos on this channel. Thanks for watching.